and you've tuned in already, then welcome. Make sure you've got your pour and sip tasting pack. If you haven't joined us before, or if this is perhaps your first month, March is your first time that you've been a subscriber and your book looks like this, then welcome to you as well. We are going to have a really, I think, action-packed, super exciting whiskey tasting this evening. I'm going to bring in Andy, who is our wonderful co-host as always. Hey Andy, how's it going?
Hello Christy, I'm fine. How are you?
I am doing really well, thank you. I've had such a great day, mostly because I am really looking forward to this. Like, actually, genuinely can't wait. And we have got two fabulous drams this evening, right? Absolutely.
Earlier when we spoke, Christy, I said I was a 6.5 out of 10 in terms of my mood, but now I'm here and we're ready to taste these whiskies. I've gone up to a 9.5, maybe a 10. By the end of tonight, I'll be a 10.
Okay, this is like, we're going to work super hard to get you to that 10, the 10 out of 10.
Exactly. But yeah, super excited. Another two great drams that we've got for everybody tonight. Another celebration of some women in the whiskey industry after the success, I think, of our first celebration. And if you joined us 2 weeks ago, we had a great tasting session with some amazing guests. And we've got some more amazing guests for you all tonight.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we are going to taste this evening. If you didn't join us before and you've still got some of your drams. Also, can I just say, if you've got any of your drams left at this point in the month, then serious kudos to you. We're going to start by tasting Rowan Co. So really exciting Irish whiskey from a brand new distillery. And we've got Lora, who's the distiller, there to chat us through. Can't get my words out. Chat through with us shortly. And then we've got Cara from Cara Laing to talk us through Scallywag, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan Williams, best time of the month. Looking forward to this. Josh, well, looking forward to my first live tasting. Your first live tasting. Welcome, Josh. Yeah, I hope you really enjoy it tonight.
Yeah, and this is so great. And thank you so much for commenting already. This is what it's all about. This is our whiskey community. Pour and Sip is literally all about us enjoying some incredible drams together, sharing our tasting notes, getting involved, asking questions. And this is the most exciting thing, I think, right? Because we've got two guests here who are literally at the top of their game and they are spending their evening with us. So get involved, ask some questions, use this as your opportunity. If you've got a burning question about whiskey and you're like, oh, but what is that? Now is the time. And there's no such thing as a wrong answer. If you're like, oh, I'm not sure my tasting notes are good enough, not a thing. Everyone is welcome.
The whole point of this is to share. We're all sharing our tasting notes. There are no right or wrong answers. We've said this many times in the past before. So please feel free to join in and write whatever you think you're getting from each whiskey. Gareth Peters is saying, come on, we need you at a 10. I promise you, Gareth Peters, I am going to be at a 10. I'm currently getting there right now. Let's say I'm 9.7 right now. James Fallon, tasting Irish whiskey a day too late. Yes, it is unfortunate, James Fallon, but this is a belated Paddy's Day celebration with this Rowan Co dram. Steve Coleman Williams, it's my first time. Go easy on me. We always go easy on our first timers. Green tea is green. Hello, hello. Just getting the mood, recapping the juveniles. Absolutely. I think that was a sensational dram, and we really enjoyed talking to Jill as well from Compass Box. That was a real privilege. Ian Slack, my sister Karen was a winner in the competition, ran earlier this month. She is online and raring to go. So congratulations twice for you of winning in the competition and then getting to join us tonight.
Yes, absolutely. And I like the idea of St. Patrick's Day Boxing Day. That's what I'm thinking this as. Why have Irish whiskey only on St. Patrick's Day when you can have it instead?
Let's celebrate it the day after. And to be honest, you can celebrate Irish whiskey any day, really, because it's please don't drink every day. But there's many, many good Irish whiskies coming out at the moment. So we've had many in our boxes before. I think Drumshanbo was one of my favourites that we've had recently. It's a beautiful dram. And having just tried this Rowan Co, I think you're all going to be really, really pleased with this one.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So on that note, let's see if we can bring Lora in. She's going to come and talk to us all about Rowan Co, which is brilliant. So, hey there, Lora, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Yes, wonderful to see you too. Thank you for coming to join us this evening.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. And hey, everyone at home. Nice to see you too.
Yes, fabulous. I'm just going to zip Andy off. We'll say bye to him for now, but don't panic. He'll be back later. He's going to have a chat with Cara.
Everyone, I will be back.
Yes, so we'll be back 20 minutes-ish time for the next dram. And then at the end, hold on to your questions. Also, if you've got any questions for Lora that we missed, or if you've got any general whiskey questions beyond what we're tasting, we are going to have some time at the end with all of us just to geek out a little bit. So we'll see you shortly, Andy. Enjoy the dram.
Enjoy.
And he's gone. I say he's gone. I shouldn't rejoice too much. We want him to come back. We don't want him to run off and leave us. But yeah, welcome to Pour and Sip. This is the first time that we've had Rowan Co. I mean, you're a fairly new distillery, right? Tell us all about sort of the backstory, how Rowan Co got started, because it's kind of like an Irish whiskey renaissance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are a very new distillery. We've been in production since 2019, but obviously building for a year before that. The brand itself has been around since 2017, so that was the first release of the blended whiskey. We have a very unique site as part of the Guinness Brewery on a very famous street in Dublin. We're on James Street, so we're immediately opposite St James's Gate, and the building the distillery is housed in is the old Guinness power station. So it's a pretty spectacular 1930s designed, 1940s built Art Deco power station in the heart of Dublin. So very, very unique building, and we retrofitted a whiskey distillery inside it because we're crazy like that. And it's been a brilliant project. But sort of background to the brand, I guess we're named after a guy called George Roe, and he had a distillery originally not very far from where we're based on Thomas Street, and he was really one of the figureheads of Irish whiskey right at its sort of height in popularity in the 1800s. Anyway, long story cut short, the original distillery declined with Irish whiskey in the 1920s, and it closed. And Irish whiskey went on a bit of a downward spiral, really, in terms of volume, and it just really disappeared to the point where there were only 3 distilleries left, really, in the whole of the island. Now, sort of fast forward to the 90s and then the noughties, and it's a very different picture. In fact, we're now, I think, last count, which is a couple of months ago now, but we were up to 38 new distilleries. So it's incredible how much the industry's grown, and that says a little bit about how much Irish whiskey has grown, which is fantastic because it's a very, very interesting place to be as a distiller.
Yeah, sure. It kind of blows my mind a little bit to go in such a short space of time from 3 to 38. It kind of like so much goes into making whiskey, and obviously it has to be aged for at least 3 years before you can release it as whiskey. It must be such an exciting time to be distilling and creating the stuff that we love on the island of Ireland right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have a very unique traditional setup in Irish whiskey where we have a lot of flexibility over the styles of whiskey we can produce. So it means that we can work with a wide variety of cereals and different mash bills, and we're not tied to using oak, so we can use different types of wood, which is super, super cool. So as a distiller, that means I get to work with a lot of cool flavors and plan a lot of cool different styles of spirit. And that's kind of how we designed our distillery to work. We're laying down the malt whiskey component for the blend we're about to taste tonight, but we're also laying down a ton of cool experiments for the future. And that's my job, basically. I'm laying down future building blocks of flavor that we can then remix into cool whiskies.
I love this idea. I'm just going to do a handful of shout-outs because I have got so many questions, and I know that everyone watching will as well. I want to say hi to Gareth, who's celebrating the big 4-0 tonight with us. So happy birthday, Gareth. We're raising a dram to you for sure. Eddie says it's never too late for Irish whiskey. Ian says he was on the Redbreast 12-year-old car strength last night and looking forward to another drop tonight. Again, I like this. Why make St. Patrick's Day just one day? Tom has cracked on with the nose, and I should say that we're going to have a chat, so feel free. It's your whiskey. Enjoy it as you like, although I will get Lora to chat us through it in a little bit. Tom is loving the slightly peppery nose. Reminds him of a rye. Steve said definitely fruity and peppery on the nose. Bruce says it's a good reason to visit Dublin again. He hasn't been since 2014. I imagine the city has changed a hell of a lot in that time, particularly with these wonderful new distilleries. And then just a couple more before I come back to you, Lora. Michael says it's quite creamy on the nose, spice, vanilla, walnuts, and muddy grass. And Jim's picking out green apples. And having had a little bit of sort of a waft under my nose, I feel like they're all quite spot on.
Those are amazing notes. I'm well impressed. Yeah, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, fabulous. So tell us a little bit about you as well. While everyone's having a little nose, I can't resist as well. Now I've had all these tasting notes, so I'm going to have a nose too. So how did you get into distilling? Is it something that you always wanted to do? How did you wind up being a distiller at one of these like shiny new Irish whiskey distilleries?
So yeah, this is actually a second career for me. And no, I didn't have any original inclinations that I wanted to be a distiller at all. So I started out with a completely different path. I went to art school in my late teens to study painting. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be creative, and I loved painting at the time. I got there. It was a very conceptually led art school in the southwest of England. It was brilliant. I loved it. And actually, they encouraged me to think completely out of the box and away from two dimensions. And I realized I got quite bored of paintbrushes quite quickly and started working with all sorts of other things, including aroma chemicals and perfumery and sound and audio and all these kind of like physical, tangible things that you can't really touch. And connecting whiskey into that is really interesting because a lot of the same chemistry that is involved with especially perfumery is really applicable in the whiskey industry. It's the same thing really. So I kind of skirted round to distillation through a love of whiskey, and I started out at tastings like this as a consumer, tasting loads of whiskey, loving it, getting really involved with that side of the industry, I guess from a perspective of passion more than anything else. And eventually went back to school to study in my early 30s. So I went to Hemy at age 30 after a career as a sound engineer, and that's how I ended up here.
I absolutely love this. And I think so often, I think people discover whiskey like a little bit later in life. I think I was maybe like 22, 23 when I was like, wow, I love this stuff. And by that point, you've probably already made these like big decisions in life about what you're going to study, what you might want to do. And actually, I love that the whiskey industry does have so many like myriad pathways in. Like there's always a way in if you're passionate about it.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And there's actually so many things you can do within it as well, which I think is also really cool. And it doesn't have to be a job like mine. There's tons of like other routes you can go in, and there's tons of specialisms that are all equally as creative and interesting. So I think there, as a place to work, it's fabulous.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned earlier sort of laying stuff down for the future and experiments. Something that blows my mind a little bit when I think about whiskey is the lag time between when you create something initially, whether you're sort of involved in the fermentation, the distillation, like choosing cask, anything like this. You're going to have quite a long time to wait before that finished product like comes to life. Like, how do you plan ahead that far? How can you be sure that like, kind of like what you're doing now is something that people will want to drink like 5, 10 years, 15 or more down the line?
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed it there. You're constantly having to think about period where you might not even be able to see what comes out of these casks. I always describe it as a bit of time travel because I'm thinking about the future and the blender is thinking about like, how can I reassemble the past, and then you kind of make it meet in the middle and the magic happens. But I think the reality is, you know, we want to lay down things that are absolutely delicious. So first and foremost, that's the only plan. And to make sure we've got enough delicious things that are going to last a long time, and we can develop and mature and nurture, you know, into I guess it's an artist's palette, really. That's what you're trying to lay down. I describe them as building blocks of flavor because if you have enough of them, it works the same as a spice rack in your kitchen. You can reassemble them and remix them into new things. And as long as you've got all those building blocks there, you can do it. So it's about laying down enough and enough diversity in that inventory so that you can be creative later.
Yeah, so I suppose in a way, you're kind of like putting, like you say, the ingredients together for the blender to then pick up and think like, what can I do with this? Like that's a bit of that, that's a bit of that, like what next?
Yeah, exactly. So it does require a bit of thinking about, you know, what that future might look like, but also a sort of broad understanding of the mechanics of blends and how you put them together and what might help the blender to be able to play around more.
Perfect. And we've got some questions coming, which I love. Keep your questions coming because like we can go super geeky, and then we'll get onto the whiskey as well because I really feel like I could talk about this for hours, and we do have a whiskey to taste. But Jeff has asked, which I think is a really good question. Like, what is the actual difference between a distiller and a blender, and how do you work together? Like, what's your day-to-day like when you're working as a distiller and a blender? How they're different? How do they intersect?
Yeah, that's a really good question because they are very different roles, but they intersect very strongly. So our master blender, Cara Laing, has been working in the whiskey industry for 3 decades. She is very, very experienced. And I have a very close relationship with her because obviously she put together our original blend, which you're going to taste. And she had a particular vision for the type of spirit character she wanted to lay down for the future. I've got to work with her and then try and translate that into a reality, and also get to learn what our plant does because it's a new distillery and it's like learning a musical instrument. It will behave the way it wants to behave as well as the way that I want it to behave, and I have to find the sweet spot there too. So yeah, I guess I'm thinking about the start of the process and the future, and Caroline's thinking about what that future might be, but then also the reality of now and reassembling that into a consistent product of really, really high quality. So very different roles. One's at the end of the process, one's almost at the beginning of the process, but we're actually looking at the same thing, but from a different lens of time, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. And tell me quickly, like, how long does it take for like a new distillery, like the new stills and new equipment to like settle into what it's going to do? Because I guess when you first set it up, there are so many different variables. How do you get like the best out of it?
I think it's an ongoing process of learning how the plant performs, because it will perform differently in different seasons of the year, in different in different temperatures. The ambient temperature might change, the water temperature might change. There's lots of ways that you're constantly having to make the plant perform in a consistent manner, that you're always working on that. But yeah, I mean, fairly quickly you can establish how it's going to work in terms of what the kit's intended to do. And that's the fun bit. It's super fun commissioning a distillery, and a brilliant experience.
I can imagine like that the first distillation run you ever do on like new kit might just be like, oh, what's it going to be? What's the character going to be? So that's really fun.
Yeah, totally. I think we had everyone in there just gazing at the whole thing, including our revenue officer, who was just as excited as anyone else.
Love it, love it. We've got another question from the Fairway 8. Good name. And this leads us on to the actual whiskey, because I feel like, honestly, I could geek out about stills forever, but there is whiskey to be tasted. They're asking, what other grains are used in the mash bill of this whiskey? So if you could give us, just talk us through this dram from literally grain to what we've got in our glass right now.
Yeah, so this is a blended Irish whiskey. We were very lucky to be able to assemble an inventory of mature spirit from lots of different distilleries in Ireland that were going back over a significant period of time. So this is actually made up of a few of those. And we're actually using two different types of whiskey: a malted barley whiskey. So that's a malt whiskey. We use malted barley to create it, and a grain whiskey, which also uses malted barley, as well as a little bit of malted barley and maize. So yeah, three different sort of I guess elements to this in terms of mash, and then two different styles of distillation, because the grain whiskey is being distilled in a continuous process, so that uses a column, and that makes a lighter style of whiskey, and we're actually filling that into first fill American ex-bourbon casks. And then the malt whiskey, so that's the one made from malted barley, that has spent time in refill casks, and those are also made of American oak, that have a slightly different profile to them, so it's a little bit spicier. And Cara Laing has married those up. In fact, she worked with bartenders in Dublin to do that, and she had a very specific brief in that she was trying to create a whiskey that would work really well in a mixed drink and really well for sipping, and I think she's done an amazing job with that.
That is fabulous. I'm just going to read some tasting notes, and then we can have a taste as well, because this is just too tempting right now. So we've got some discussions around if you've added water or not, just to sort of revisit that a little bit. It's your whiskey. If you want to add a couple of drops of water, feel free, but I would say, do you have a nose and a taste neat first, and go gently, because you can always add more water and we can't take it out, just as a little thing. Eddie is saying it tastes of orange marmalade on buttered toast with a peppery finish. A good breakfast whiskey. I quite like this concept. Carlo, I get apples and green tea on the nose and quite a light dram with a dry peppery finish. Really enjoyable. Ian says spicy honey, mellowed after being in the glass. Mark is getting vanilla custard. Michael's saying, oh, it's all jumped up, even more coming through. Creamy, buttery vanilla, almost like buttercream icing. Yes, I love that.
Nice, I love it.
That is so great. Andrew's got, not our Andrew, another Andrew. Pepper, cream vanilla, and a lovely kick to it. Michael's saying it's like the tartness you get from a dark berry crumble on rhubarb. I like the specificness. And then one more for now, really lovely one from Jonathan. I'm really impressed by this, beautifully rounded. So what are we getting on the nose and palate? For anyone like me who's like literally salivating all these tasting notes, where are we at with it?
So I'd be going for a first nose. I mean, all the people that are picking up apples, the orchard fruit notes, brilliant, spot on. There's a load of character that comes from the distiller actually here. Really light orchard fruits. Well, the way Cara Laing designed this whiskey, we wanted the nose to really deliver on the palate, so it leads you to the palate, and when we come to taste it, hopefully you'll notice those fruits as a sort of overriding note through the whiskey, which is delicious. I love them because it's kind of delicate, it's not too in your face, but very, very pleasant. And this reminds me of pears, apples, all that kind of stuff, the skin of red apples.
Yes.
tinned fruit, yeah, all of that. Now there's also a super creamy note there, so anyone like picking up all those vanillas, creams, even the biscuity stuff, yeah, very deliberate. Again, that's our American oak first fill casks that are doing the majority of that work. Really unctuous kind of layer to it. So again, like talking about those building blocks of flavour, Cara Laing was assembling those very, very deliberately to create this layered flavour effect and layered aroma effect on the nose. And yeah, I think she's done a really good job.
It's delicious. Should we have a taste?
Yeah.
Cheers. And happy belated St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, so you too.
Oh, I'm really enjoying it. So creamy.
Now, a really specific part of Cara Laing's brief was, like I was just saying, that we wanted this to work as a sipping whiskey as well as in a mixed drink. And the creaminess is so important, and I think texture is so underrated in whiskey and really important. That creaminess is actually because we haven't chill filtered the whiskey. And we did that very, very deliberately. The bartenders were asking for it that we worked with. And I think that just lends all that unctuous note to it. And it works really nicely with the vanilla as well, because it really coats the inside of your mouth. You can really bite into this whiskey, which I love. Yeah, you get tons more of that vanilla from the American oak, again, on the palate. But anyone that's picking out the peppery, spicy notes, again, the refill casks are doing that work. So cinnamon, light baking spices, that kind of stuff. I think someone picked up rye and the peppery note. Yeah, exactly. Like there is light spice here, and it's those different types of oak casks that we're using for this.
Yeah, it's so great. We've got really a few more great ones. So Colin's getting strawberry Campino boiled sweets on the finish. Robert is also getting boiled sweets.
Yeah.
Josh is getting powdered candy. Reminds me of a Lush shop. So all your bath bombs and this fruitiness is it's quite.
I'll tell you what, that's really cool, because on our we're not open to the public at the moment, but on the distillery tour, one of the things that we do is we get you to nose the whiskey alongside a little jar of sweets. And
love it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were going for with this.
That is so great. Well, it's working. We've got a few more questions. One from Adrian, which I love, super geeky, really enjoying this. What size of column still was used for the grain?
So the column still and the grain whiskey we don't make ourselves. We've bought that. It's in our inventory. So I know there were a number of different column stills that were used in different distilleries to produce these. I don't know all the specific details of those, but when you're talking about column stills, they're all going to be upwards in this style of process. They're going to be more than 40 plates at the very least.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of plates. I love column stills, and I love single grain whiskey as well. I think we've got some single grain coming up in future boxes, which I'm really excited about. And grain whiskey as a component is often so overlooked, and I'm glad that blends are now getting a bit more love and appreciation for all these like wonderful component parts that go in there. So that is awesome. Peter has asked, is this natural colour?
So yeah, that's a good question. We do use a touch of caramel for consistency between batches. Now, casks are living, breathing, natural objects. They all do different things to whiskey, and there's always slight inconsistencies between them. And if we put the whiskey in bottles and then had it on the shelves and the bottles were all next to each other and they all look different, it wouldn't look great either. Having said that, we don't use an awful lot of caramel at all, and we only use it if we absolutely have to. So the majority of this colour is from casks. And again, like I said, we use a tiny bit of caramel for batch-to-batch consistency when we're making this up.
Cool. Good to know. Good to know. Tom Mission is on the cocktail mindset now. He's like, this would make a cracking old fashioned with an Irish twist, which I love. And then Jacob is asking, if this is with a mixer, what would be the champion pour to mix it with? So I guess, yeah, what mixer do you recommend to have with this?
Oh, wow. I'll tell you one of my favorites, but I would just highly recommend also that you experiment for yourself, because this is a whiskey that works with a lot of different mixes. I love this with tonic and a slice of grapefruit, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about grapefruit as a garnish, and like with some whiskies in particular, it's just like a heavenly combination.
Yeah, I think the fruity notes in this whiskey really work well with the bitter notes in tonic. Tonic water just plays off the sweetness, the fruitiness. It's the complete antithesis. So that would be how I would love to. That's my sort of go-to pour, and it's super easy and quick to make at home.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Mike has said, I can see how this is designed for mixing. I almost want to cook with it, which seems like a waste, but it's got so many spices and sweet flavors. That's a really interesting concept, because I've never thought about cooking with whiskey, but whiskey and food pairing is such a thing that we quite often end up talking about this on Pour and Sip, and then I get very hungry. But yeah, I guess this with a meal, like with a long drink, would be really delicious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very versatile whiskey, put it that way.
Yeah.
So I'd recommend trying it in any configuration that you can think of. Be imaginative.
Yes, for sure. We've had another question come through about chill filtration, because you mentioned that earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about what this is? Because this one's not chill filtered, right? And that's where we get that lovely creamy mouthfeel.
Yeah, chill filtration is interesting. It was actually a process designed when whiskey first started getting exported overseas. I believe this was a Scottish invention, and it was going out on airplanes, getting really, really cold. And then by the time it landed in its destination, it was cloudy. And that's because when whiskey gets cold, what are called fatty acids, long chain fatty acid esters, end up precipitating out of solution, and they create what looks like a haze. And obviously, if you're putting an ice cube in your whiskey and it starts to go cloudy, some people don't like the look of that. However, we think getting rid of the fatty acid esters is maybe not what we want to do, because they actually contain a lot of flavour and a lot of texture. So there's nothing wrong with chill filtration, but for this particular style of whiskey and this blend, we decided that we wanted to leave all of those bits in. And if you think of it like freshly baked bread out of an oven without the butter on top, that's kind of why we wanted to leave these in for this whiskey. And it's actually it's very much where a lot of that texture comes from.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing. I think it's really interesting to consider it as a production choice. I think sometimes it can be like chill filtration bad, non-chill filtered good, but it ultimately depends on what you're trying to create your whiskey to be, what you want at the end.
Yeah, that's it. And it's just a process of filtration where you basically cool the whiskey down and run it through some filter sheets or a filter module, and it just removes those esters when they come out of solution. It makes it easier for the sheets to pick them up when the liquid is cold.
Yeah.
And sometimes it suits a style of whiskey, and sometimes you might want to do things differently. And we took the route to not chill filter this whiskey.
And I also feel like it's a lesson to us to not panic if we see a haze in our whiskey. It's probably going to be fine. It's just a little bit of haze because it's got chili.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that.
It's all good. There's a really lovely comment from Bruce come in. It's so easy to get snobbish about single malts and ignore the blends. This one has totally blown me away and thrown my whiskey thoughts into a whirl.
That's a great comment. Lovely feedback. Yeah, exactly. And this is delicious. I would be not standing in front of it if I didn't think that.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I'm just like, I'm now trying to think like, what do we want to mix it with? What could we do with it? Just before we say bye for now, because hopefully you can stick around and come back and join us again at the end. What about the future of the Irish whiskey category is like most exciting to you? Like what sort of gets you up in the morning and think, yes, I want to be part of this, and there's all this amazing stuff to come?
Well, I think what's really cool is that there are so many new distilleries at the moment in Ireland that there's a lot of things we haven't seen yet. If you think in 5, 6, 7, 8 years' time, a lot of these new distilleries are going to be coming online and releasing their product for the first time. And I know that we're all doing different things, and we're all doing quite experimental things. And there's going to be such an absolute smorgasbord of flavour and character and different styles of spirit, of mash bills, of you name it. I mean, it's a very creative category. So it's going to be amazing. Stick along and see what else is going to be amazing in the future. We've got some great distilleries and great whiskies out there already as an industry. It's only going to get better. So I think quality wise and from a consumer perspective, it's cool.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I really cannot wait to see what comes next. And I feel like there are so many people doing like really amazing, inventive things. And yeah, this is like one example. So thank you so much for talking us through Rowan Co.
That is a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yay. As I say, hang around and we'll zip you back in at the end and we will do some more geeking out because this is just an absolute joy. I'm going to bring Andy back for a moment. Hey, Andy, how's it going?
Hello, that was a great chat, you guys, and I'm absolutely loving this. I have to say the balance between those creamy notes you were talking about, Christy, and then the spice that's coming through as well is just beautifully balanced. This lovely kind of vanilla, creamy kinds of vanilla porridgey kind of note, which is really, really wonderful. Lovely stuff.
Yeah, I'm so here for it. So we'll see you in a bit, Laura. Thank you so much. We'll chat shortly.
You.
Bye. And in a moment, we're going to bring in Cara, who's from Cara Laing. And we had some really interesting comments about the difference between sort of blending and distillation. And I feel like we can get super into blending with this next dram. So it's a blended malt, right, Andy?
It is absolutely a blended malt with a malt from Speyside, which is, you know, one of my favourite regions. And actually, these guys have loads of blended malts in their remarkable malt region from every single region in Scotland, which is just such a cool, innovative and unique thing. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Cara and getting to learn more about them.
Fabulous. And speaking of Cara, let's zip her in. Hey, Cara, how are you doing?
Oh, very good. Wish I'd had a sample of the Rowan Co to try. It sounded phenomenal. I'm a huge grain fan, so that'll be a Master of Malt purchase later, I'm sure.
Fabulous.
Or buy it from our Pour and Sips members store. I'm sure we can let you into the members store.
Absolutely. I am going to leave you guys to it for now, and I'm going to sip along. I've got my scallywag ready to go, and I'll chat with you again in a bit.
Great.
Bye, Christy.
Later.
So, how are you, Cara, today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I said I was about 6.5 earlier today when I spoke to Christy. But this, for everyone who was hoping that I'd be up by a 10 now, I'm definitely up to a 10 now, having just tried that and now about to try Scallywag, which I have to say, again, was the first time I tried this whiskey. I'd tried Big Pete before, and I'd recently been sent from the new one from the Gauldrons, which I really, really enjoyed as a huge Campbelltown fan. But this is my first time trying Scallywag, so I'm super excited.
And you're a Speyside fan?
I'm a huge Speyside fan. So, yeah, really interested to getting into this dram. But let's just discuss you first and kind of discuss your kind of entry into the whiskey world, because obviously, if anyone's heard you speak before, you're the granddaughter of...
Yes, third generation, but in truth, and it's not the most romantic story, had very little love, passion or enthusiasm for Scotch whisky until I was probably about 20. Before that, I was all about vodka. I'm embarrassed to say I drank it as a student, and marketing's very much my background, so it was fascinating to hear Lora talk. A lot of similarities between what they are doing and what we do, but that was not my gig. I was all about marketing, and from a spirit perspective had far more interest in vodka. And then I think my dad, who's our chairman, believes whiskey's in your blood, and I ended up working at White Mackay and under the tuition of Richard Patterson, and also my dad, Fred Laing, genuinely fell in love with whiskey. And I now probably do believe it's in the blood, and love what I do and couldn't imagine working in another category. I think I'm hugely lucky. There are people out there that have to be passionate about toilet roll or kitchen towel, and I get this phenomenal spirit that takes years to make and so much skill and craft, and it's a fun category to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, how did it feel growing up around such a whiskey legacy, really? And obviously, mentored by Richard Patterson. I mean, these are some huge names, and to grow up in that kind of world must be pretty special.
Yeah, and I think I was aware of it. I was lucky. Subconsciously, it obviously did soak in. I spent quite a lot of time in the Douglas Laing head office when I was a little girl. Got to meet a lot of big characters from the whisky industry, Richard Patterson probably being the most notable one, but over the years was lucky enough to call some industry bigwigs uncle, and inevitably their love and passion for this spirit took its toll positively on me, and you start hearing things, grasping things. I think the first ever hot toddy I had, aged 7 or 8, with a stinking cold was made with the base of Port Ellen. I hated it. I now totally appreciate a dram of Port Ellen, but
not sure you can be making hot toddies with Port Ellen anymore.
No, but back in the day, unfortunately, this is going back some years where there was a plentiful supply, especially for us. So, but no, it's fun, and now it resonates and means a lot more to me because I live and breathe this stuff literally in every sense all the time.
That's amazing, and you're essentially head of whiskey, right, for Douglas Laing.
Yes.
Let's talk about what that entails and what's your daily kind of what are you doing day to day, and what does that entail?
It's a wonderfully ambiguous title, which in Douglas Laing we all wear many hats. So as I said, marketing is very much my background and what I've done all my life. But that's one kind of key part of my job, and within that we do a lot of new product development. We always like to keep things fresh and interesting. But then beyond that, we very much pride ourselves in the fact that family members sign off each and every cask sample that comes in. So in a typical week, I would say we probably get about 20 to 25 cask samples through. They might be for our single casks, like Old Particular, or they might be for the blended malts like Scallywag, Big Pete. But each and every sample is approved by either Fred, our chairman, Chris, my husband, our CEO, or myself. And sometimes it's just a straight approval. Yep, the quality's good. Sometimes, in all honesty, it's quality's not good. This isn't good enough for blended malts or single cask. We need to re-rack. Which sounds terribly straightforward and simple. It's never that simple. But sometimes it also involves writing tasting notes. But we feel the spirit quality is key. We appreciate our whiskies aren't the cheapest in the market, but we hope the fact we put our name to it and we sign off everything that's released from us gives consumers a bit of reassurance.
Absolutely cool. So, I mean, before we get into the actual whiskey itself, let's just, for anyone who doesn't know, can we talk a little brief history about the company? Because we mentioned about Old Particular and obviously your regional malt. So just a little brief history about the company and how it started and where you kind of are now, really.
Sure. In a nutshell, the company was established after World War II by my grandpa. So in 1948, it was formally established. Lucky for us, he had the foresight to set up what in the industry we call filling programs, whereby we essentially buy spirit at 0 hours of age. When it's straight off the still, we mature it our own way in our own casks and release it when we believe it's perfect. He set up a number of these. They were done on a handshake. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to divulge all our filling programs, but they're with a lot of the big boys, the big leading names in the whiskey world, and they were done on a handshake back in 1948, 1950, whatever, and they still stand today, which is incredible. So that early work that was done stood us in very good stead. From the early 50s through to the sort of 90s, we were all about blended Scotch. I rate it highly. I think it is hugely underrated. That was our bread and butter. We won the Queen's Award for Export Achievement off the back of some phenomenal blended Scotch brands that we created and developed. And then essentially my dad recognised a huge gap in the market, admiring, in all honesty, Gordon and MacPhail very much. We know them as a family. We like what they do. And Fred identified, why are we not tapping into some of this? We've got some fairly good casks of Macallan and Laphroaig and Port Ellen, and we just put them in blends. Let's dabble in the single cask category. And he established a very successful brand, which we no longer have. But the learnings were all there. We became quite a key player in the single cask category. And then I joined the business in 2013 and recognised the single cask piece is great. And there's nothing quite like tasting a high strength, non-chill filtered whiskey. It is like tasting it straight from a cask in the warehouse, but actually discovered Big Pete, which is a blended malt, and recognised this is phenomenal, and there's scope for more like this. So developed the regional malts, and then last year became distillers for the first time when we took over Strathern, and are in the process of building another distillery in Glasgow just now. So
it's all happening.
Yeah, we don't stand still.
I was about to say, I mean, it's amazing how, like, I mean, I think Old Particular is an amazing, and I've tried some really amazing versions of some beautiful whiskies that I love independent bottlings. You know, when you buy one from an auction, for example, and you just get that super surprise, and you just take a real pump on something, you get it absolutely amazing. But you see different characters to certain distilleries that you think you know, and that they can taste very different in independent bottling. But what you've done with the kind of the regional malts, so for anyone who doesn't know, Big Pete is the Isla version of essentially what we're trying tonight with the Scallywag, which is the Speyside version. You've got now one blended malt for every single region, right?
Correct, yep.
That's awesome. And that's really cool and interesting. And I've got to say, the labels are some of the funnest and just some of the best labels around. I wish we could show you. I mean, if you see on your dram here, you'll see the little terrier here, the little Scallywag himself. Oh, there he is. I don't know, my minuscule Scallywag here when he's just there. I get really bad with the left and rights on these, to be honest.
No, I'm clearly confused. There we go. That was our family dog who inspired this one. So genuinely.
Okay, so cool. Right, let's get into the whiskey. So if you have, because everyone has already given us their tasting notes and everything. So I'm going to pour myself a little dram now. So talk to us a bit about Scallywag. Sure. I've already asked you how many malts are included in the blend. So yeah, just give us a little bit about Scallywag and kind of tell us what goes into this blend.
So it's a blended malt, or in all honesty, we prefer a marriage of single cask, single malts. In here you have, we don't divulge everything because we think there's a lot to be said for the blender's secret, but there are about 7 different single cask, single malts that we use every time in each batch. Some of the big boys, including Glenrothes, Macallan and Mortlake are in here. When Scallywag started, it had quite a heavy proportion of first fill bourbon casks. Over time, we've eased that down. So what you're tasting is essentially now predominantly, if not entirely, sherry butt matured. So for me, it's got that, what we try to create is the archetypal Speyside character. Now, we recognise fully Speyside's the biggest region. There's a massive variety of flavours, but we've tried to generalise for each of the regional malts, and typically Speyside whiskies have quite a sherry influence. They've got that big, round, robust character. So in your glass, you've got non-chill filtration, which obviously has been covered at length, and I wholeheartedly agree. You should get that nice, thick, creamy mouthfeel because we haven't chill filtered.
You can also see as these teardrops here are just running down so super slowly and sticking to the glass, and you won't be able to see it. But if you do kind of turn your glass around, you'll kind of see the legs on this whiskey. They're really not falling down. And sometimes with chill filtration, you can see those teardrops can run down really quickly. But typically with this, you can see this thick and oily, so it's sticking to the glass.
Mm-hmm. It's also totally natural colouring. So we are quite, again, I agree with Laura's points that consistency for some people is key. We quite like that each and every batch varies a little. So what you've got here is entirely natural colouring. It's just been absorbed from those sherry butts over time. As I said, typically about 7 malts used, and each of the component parts are individually approved by us as a family, and then they're vatted together. That's not the easiest task. In truth, the single cask side of our business is far easier. The skill and challenges that we face on blending single malts is far more. But hopefully the end result is pleasing to everyone. For me, Scallywag's got a lovely fruitcake character. There's a bit of cinnamon and nutmeg spice.
I'm just getting lovely kind of sultanas, raisins. I mean, it's not quite a sherry bomb for me on the nose that like maybe an Abuna is, or maybe the Glenfarclas 105, for example. But it's because there's a little, there's the cinnamon, there's lovely raisins, fruitcake, Christmas cake as well. I'm getting hints of kind of like leather as well underneath that, maybe coming from Macallan. I always get that with Macallan, so I don't know what percentage of Macallan is in this. But again, lots of notes coming in, by the way, Cara. So I'm just going to quickly read out a few of the notes. That Craig Jones, the smell of this one reminds me of soaring malt loaf, really fruity. Carlo, mellow's quite a strong vanilla flavour. Can't pin all the flavours down. Bit of an enigma. El Sutton, fruitcake, spice, sherry, tastes like Christmas cake. Absolutely, I always get this with sherried Speyside drams. Christmas cake is just always a Christmassy kind of dram and feeling. Steve Coleman Williams, Christmas cake finish. David Woodcock, Speyside with a nod to Isla for me, with a smoky hint, with good Scottish cream, really good. The scallywag reminds me of bitter dram booey. Eddie Marshall, this develops in the glass. I'm now getting maple syrup on the nose, maybe maple sugar. And Anne Dillon, palate is lovely and then gets really warm with, palate's quite sour to start, but then gets really warm with the honey undertones. So I actually haven't had a sip yet. So cheers, I can't get my legs. Cheers, everybody.
The honey and vanilla references I get because there is still a degree of bourbon cask influence in there, so that's entirely correct.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like this really bright, fruity note to begin with beautiful kind of creamy honey. There's an oily viscosity to this dram in the mouthfeel when you first on the arrival, and this wonderful kind of spice that's lingering in my mouth right now. Some kind of cinnamon, a little bit of pepper, kind of black pepper spice. Simon saying licorice on the palate. Love the texture. Jacob's Island, definitely get some bramble fruits in there as well. I'm saying absolutely lots of red fruits and kind of stewed red fruit.
Yeah. The stewed dark fruits and the references to fruitcake, Christmas cake, mince pies. It's technically we should be doing this November, December time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe this December we'll be doing it again. This is bottled at 46% as well. So someone's saying that the water is adding a lot to this, and he's getting a much richer fruit flavour. I mean, would you add water to this? Or I mean, for me, it's really, really smooth for me without the water.
I think it's totally individual preference. I like it up at least 46% strength, but I completely recommend if people feel they want to open it up a bit to add a few drops of water, you'll get something completely different. Likewise, to drink scallywag outside, I find if I drink scallywag in the fresh air, it tastes completely different from sitting inside my house as well. It's incredible. The
environment makes a huge difference for me when you're tasting whiskey. I mean, if you have a Lefroy by the bonfire, for example, it's just like that's the moment for a Lefroy for me, or just in home when it's freezing cold outside. Oh, are you there with us? Sorry, you just froze on me there for just a 3 seconds.
No, I agree. Or a Lefroy at the beach. It's pretty good.
Wow, okay. I've never tried that yet, but I would love to if I ever get to go to the beach again. Ian Turner just asking, what's the difference between the single cask versus a single malt?
So, good question. I think it might be a bit too late at night for me to fully get this explained well, but essentially, so taking a single malt brand that we all know, say Glenmorangie, essentially their single malts are blends. They marry together just hundreds of single casks. That's essentially what we're doing as well with Scallywag on a smaller scale. So we have our small batches where we marry maybe 4 single casks of Macallan together. It is single malt, it's just a single cask of their single malt. We marry them together, and it's essentially at that stage, it's for us to get this perfect balance, this great end result, which hopefully typifies a Speyside whisky experience.
And Green Tea is Green is asking, does the cask give it the colour, or do you add any caramel or other colouring? I think you said it's completely natural colour.
Yeah, we add nothing. And it does mean every batch has slight variation, but again, we quite like that. we're not one of the big boys, so we quite like the fact that we get quite a lot of consumers comparing batches, which is, I think, quite fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I some of my favourite things are coming batches, like the Abuna is a classic example that everyone is comparing the difference, and everyone says it wasn't as good as it used to be. It wasn't as good as it used to be. But I've tried some amazing batches recently, so yeah, I think it's really interesting trying stuff in batches, and kind of that kind of is like kind of analysing the difference even between a year of those kind of drams. So it's really interesting. What for you? I mean, are you releasing this is it yearly batches for the Scallywag?
No, so we probably do about 4 to 6 batches of Scallywag core. So this one every year. It depends. Sometimes it's a little bit more than that, but they're reasonably sized batches, but compared to the big brands, it's still very small, and it allows us to take a real hands-on approach in terms of quality. And in truth, we try and get as much consistency as possible, but to the point earlier of casks are living, breathing things, whiskey's really hard to control. You work to almost a recipe, but you inevitably end up with quite a bit of variety between each one.
I think that's really fun, to be honest with you. I think as a consumer, that's super fun to be able to buy, especially if you drink one of your favourites. I love Scallywag, so I want to see what the new batches are like, and it's really great comparing that. Just a couple more comments before we go, and we don't have to do anything before we invite Christy and Laura back in. Richard Francis, lovely, warm, peppery finish. Jacob's Island, this is a perfect winter whiskey. Karen Taylor Slack, after the pepperness goes, it becomes a lasting mouth feeling of prunes. Ali C, sherry on the nose, but moves into honey and vanilla with a note of beeswax. Furniture polish, but in a good way. David Walcott, this is going well with dark chocolate would be a good pairing.
Yeah, totally. I think he might be on our Instagram. He's on, and it's our main pairing for Scallywag. We quite passionately believe that a good quality dark chocolate alongside this dram just brings out the dark fruit and the cocoa character. Definitely worth trying for anyone who's got a droplet.
In terms of 60%, 70% darkness, or
exactly. Or to be honest, even a bit of Cadbury's, it would probably still be pretty good.
Basically, chocolate is going to go well with
it's fun for Easter.
But super briefly, you're in the process of building a distillery at the moment, right? So we're going to get your own distiller, essentially. How's that going?
It has been a labour of love. It is now progressing at pace. COVID's definitely not helped us. It was in a great place at the start of last year, and then literally ground to a halt. But it's exciting, and the stills are produced and sitting ready to go, and we're on track to be distilling at the end of this year. So it's an exciting one. We've got a very definite spirit profile planned, and it's now just a case of getting it up and running and moving, which, it's certainly all go. It's number one priority in the business at the moment.
It sounds super exciting, but I can imagine it's quite the headache at the moment with COVID. So probably Jacob's Island, just something about this one is so intriguing. Anna Dillon's, could you ask Cara how she drinks this?
I drink it every which way. I have to say I like it neat. I do genuinely love a Scallywag with chocolate, but through the summer months, my midweek drink of choice when I've had a tough day dealing with distillery builds is with ginger ale and a squeeze of fresh lime. It's a phenomenal combination, and I think the ginger ale aspect just again releases some of the spiciness. So as a long drink, the squeeze of fresh lime is pretty important, but highly recommended.
That sounds lovely.
Some purists would be like, oh, you can't do that, but worth trying at least once.
Robert Fox has just asked quickly before you end, where is the distillery based?
It's in Glasgow, so in the heart of Glasgow. Again, it was that has added to the challenges, but we took the view, we're a family business that has always been in Glasgow. We're a Glasgow family. Our first kind of key distillery we felt should be in the heart of the city. And then we've got Strathearn, which is our very much boutique Highland distillery. So we've got the pretty picturesque one. Now we're going for the slightly more urban offering, but bizarrely with quite a Highland, big, chunky, sherried style of whiskey. That's what we're aiming for with Clutha.
Okay, well, really exciting. One more question, sorry, Chris, before when blending so many distilleries, do you look into where the malt barley is grown with the farm distillery popularity and Waterford experiments? It may be important.
We would love to be there. It's probably the one area where independent bottlers have to acquiesce. I mean, we take charge when it comes to the wood piece, which I spent some time at Suntory and we were told 70% of whiskey's character comes from the wood. So I'm very much focused on the cask maturation piece. But in truth, we can't really dictate on the other raw ingredients. We have to go with the flow. Less so on Strathearn, where we're very focused on provenance. But yeah, on the filling program side, we're at the mercy of others.
Okay, get it. Great. Well, it's been amazing speaking to you, Cara, and it's been amazing. I think we'll invite Christy back now, Lora, and we can wrap up tonight's tasting if you're there. Yes.
Oh, hi. That was so fascinating. Thank you so much, Cara. I feel like you've always had so much to dig into right there.
Absolutely.
There was so many similarities with what Lora was saying, which was nice and reassuring.
It was lovely to hear you talking about your whiskey. I've got so many of your bottles downstairs, actually, which I should have brought up, but delicious.
And it's making me really want to explore some chocolate now. I feel like both of the whiskies would go well with like really distinct chocolates, which is making me kind of, peckish for dessert.
Everyone's sharing chocolates, apparently. We've had dark chocolate. Someone's even recommended a Twix to go with the scallywags. Any chocolate.
It's so great. I'm interested, actually, from both of you, a little bit to know, like, how do you think the whiskies that you personally enjoyed have been changing over the sort of the last year with lockdown and everything? I feel like whiskey's so diverse. Like, are you drinking more cocktails? Are you sipping more? Are you doing food pairing? Like, how has your enjoyment of whiskey changed?
I think I've been able to dial into lots more whiskey worlds, which has been fantastic. So I've been trying all sorts of things, but also being able to involve myself in lots that I wouldn't ordinarily have the time or wouldn't be able to speak to so many people. So that's been a real benefit for me of lockdown. And seeing everybody's creations and getting inspired by everyone here. I mean, seeing how everyone else drinks their whiskey is how I get my inspiration to create new stuff. So it's been fab.
Yeah, I think similarly, we obviously my husband's also in the industry, and the two of us have very purposely gone out and bought other whiskey brands that we've not necessarily tried before, and found some real gems in amongst it, because you inevitably drink what's easily accessible, and our brands are very easily accessed by us, but to spend some time getting to know some other great whiskies in the market's been superb through lockdown. And I think experimenting, I've developed quite a taste for Boulevardier whiskey-based cocktails, and that was something I pre-lockdown I'd never considered. So I think it's sort of opened people's minds to trying different things.
Absolutely. I think it's as Mike Pizarro says here, joining Pour and Sip is one of the best things about lockdown, because you're absolutely so many different whiskies every month that you might not have bought, just up, and also you're getting to try bits of everyone. So it's really great. Usually we'd go to a bar and you could try a few drams at the bar and you can experiment with different stuff, or I have one of those, but at home it's difficult because you've got to buy yourself a bottle every time in order to do that. So clubs like this are really great to be able to kind of experiment and to kind of try different whiskey. Now, I never really tried an Irish whiskey before. Wow, that Rowan Co was amazing. I'm going to try more Irish whiskey. Just before we wrap up, super quick, everyone, if you want to let us know which your favourite from the box this month has been. Yep. Interesting question for everybody there. Fingers at the ready. Simon Robb really liked the Scallywag, bottle ordered from the members site already. Craig Jones, 2 fab drams, very difficult to choose between the two, so might just have to buy both. I think that's the best way to put it. Bruce Edwards, the Bullet surprised me. It's on my list for sure. Absolutely, that was great when we tried it. Yeah, absolutely. So, go on, Kristen.
I just wanted to shout out to Johnny White 200, who says M&S chocolate hot cross buns are paired beautifully with the whiskies this evening. That is a great shout.
Yeah, and very festive.
Brilliant.
That is so good. I would really struggle to pick between these. I know we've just told everybody to pick their favourite from the 5. I think this has been such a strong box this month. It's been amazing to have people to chat through as well. We just had a comment actually from Sarah, who's tuned in. Really enjoyed tonight's tasting, both in terms of the drams and the wealth of info provided by both Lora and Cara. In the process of a career/industry change feeling, #inspired. Yes, come and join the whiskey industry.
Brilliant. That's great to hear.
Sound engineer to working in the whiskey industry is one of my favourite, I think, that I've heard recently. Differences of go from sound engineer. I'm a musician as well. I've met many sound engineers, so I'm you know, that career path is really, really interesting to.
It's useful, all right. The practical physics bit has never served me any harm. It's been good.
I can imagine it. Alistair Taft, Deanston for me, just from the Bullet, but ordered both. Ian Turner, Bullet. Tom Mission, absolutely. Pour and Sip community and the store are amazing. Yes, we are. Absolutely. Woo. Exactly. Green Tea is Green. Rowan Co. absolutely loved it. C. Coleman Williams show, has COVID affected the whiskey market, not just production, but selling, buying availability, etc. That is quite a big question. 31 minutes past.
Yeah, I mean, just a very quick take from almost like a master of malt perspective. I think when we got to lockdown 1, there was a lot of logistics that were tricky with like bottles and dry goods and stuff like this. I think that maybe had the biggest impact, but luckily everything's smoothed out now, which is really great. I don't know what you both found, Laura and Cara.
We're still feeling it, I have to say. And the weirdest one, I mean, it makes total sense, but the accessing of casks, particularly casks at the back of the warehouse where it's got to be handled by people. They're not 2 meters long. So the number of casks we've gone to bottle and then last minute realised we can't get to them, it's definitely brought challenges. There's also a cardboard shortage, which you don't think immediately is going to impact whiskey, but then all the shipping cases are cardboard. So no, I would say, unfortunately, COVID continues to affect Douglas Laing on a weekly basis at the moment, at least. But hopefully not for much longer.
Yeah, fingers crossed. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, clearly we have to do things very, very differently in the distillery with what's going on. So, I mean, we've got a big old building that helps. I mean, it's quite easy to socially distance in the distillery itself, but it's still, you know, you have to take extra care, and we have to obviously risk assess everything differently. And yeah, it does slow everything down, of course.
Yeah, of course. Andy, were you going to go to some of the votes coming in? There's so many people. I think we've got love for all of the different drams.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think it's an even mix between all the drams. I'll quickly read out your votes before we wrap up, because I'm aware that we're going over. Bruce Edwards, Bullet and Rowan Co. top for me. Scallywag for me. Jeremy Anderson. Sorry, it's lots going on. Andy Irwin, Compass Box Juveniles for me. Ian Slack, Scallywag, Rowan Co. and Deanston. Thanks for a great selection. Richard Francis, loved the themed box this month. We really enjoyed learning about the people involved. I think we are going to be going forwards. We're going to do many more themes boxes, not every month, but there will be different kind of things. Actually, eyes peeled for May. I think we've got another theme coming up.
Yes.
It's going to be awesome. One that I'm going to particularly love massively. Chloe Ross, Rowan Co. was our favourite. Gareth Peters, Rowan Co. Juveniles. Robert Fox, I love the Deanston, got a members bottle. Compass Box, James, so yeah, there's Scallywag. Oh, these are repeats. Wow, there are so many votes coming in. I can't even.
Coming in.
The Scallywag, Michael Smith, Deanston. Wow. Okay, I think the conclusion here is that there is a mix of everyone saying they like pretty much all the whiskies, which is really means that we're doing our job very well.
Yes, and also that you guys are doing your job very well. You're creating whiskies that people cannot choose between, so that's the happy days really all round.
Sorry, when I said I'm doing my job well, I meant us picking drams for everybody. Not me picking these whiskies, particularly our two guests tonight, who are definitely much more important than myself in that kind of way.
Amazing. And just to say thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. We're going to be back on the 1st of April. It is confirmed. We did have a minor worry earlier that as it's the 1st of the month on the Thursday, we're like, will everyone have their boxes? But you will have your boxes in time for the 1st of April for a whole 5 brand new drams set up, which is great. And thank you enormously to both Lora and Cara for spending your Thursday evening with us. It's been such a dream. Thank you so much. 2 very different, very delicious whiskies. I have loved it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Yeah.
So great. I feel like we've had so many great questions, so many awesome tasting notes. Time to kick back, I think, with the dregs of the drams here, because I managed to save a little bit of each one. And yeah, it's fabulous. So check out the member store. Don't forget, we've got like rewards and all this sorts of stuff for members specifically. And we'll be back on the 1st. And Andy, thank you as well. Thank you for joining us again and joining me and having a lovely geeky chat.
Yes, thank you to everyone. Pleased to be back. Cheers, everybody.